So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of AppSecEngineer. I'm really excited about this episode because I am talking to somebody in the application security tooling industry. So one of the things that all of us use, especially in application security, is we use tools. We use static analysis tools, we use dynamic analysis tools, we use source composition analysis tools, and of course today we are using cloud security tools, container security tools, and all kinds of tools. So one of the things that I always like to do is talk to people who are implementing it, because heaven knows it's a tough thing to do. It's constantly changing. The landscape is changing all the time. So I always wonder how popular tools keep up with what they do and how they do certain things. So today we are going to get it straight from the horse's mouth. We're going to be talking to Florin Coada, who is a product manager at HCL AppScan. I started interacting with Florin about, I would say, 3 months ago. And it was very interesting. We had a bunch of conversations on LinkedIn and stuff, and very interesting interacting with him. So I thought I'd have him as a guest and see what he has to say about the state of application security and application security engineering today. So welcome, Florin, to this. Episode. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for spending the time with us on this episode of AppSecEngineer.
Hey, thank you very much for having me here. I'm always happy to talk to people. This time in 2020, it's quite difficult to get face-to-face time. So anything I can do, I'll do it. I'll get on WebEx. I'll get on the podcast. I will do the extra step to get here. But
absolutely, yeah. So nice to see that. Yeah. So we set this up a month ago, but
I think about a month ago it was. Yes.
Right. So yeah. So Florin and I, like I said, we've been chatting about different things. He did send me some recommendation for some tools that they've built, open source tools that AppScan has built, which was very interesting to me because I don't think this was a thing before the recent HCL the developments that have happened in your engineering. So I think this is kind of new. I had not heard of an open source tool from AppScan, so it was very interesting to see that you brought it up, and it was quite good. When I used it, it actually did what it was supposed to do, and I was very happy to see that. So anyway. Sorry. Go ahead.
I would call it free to use. We haven't open sourced it, so we still have the code to ourselves. We keep it to ourselves, but we did make it free to use, and it is something new for us. It's a community edition, is what we call it. And just like you said, it's something new for us as well. We like to experiment. We want to try things, and we thought, hey, we have something we can actually make easy to use for people. So why not?
Absolutely.
So it's glad to hear that you found some interesting stuff. I do have to say something. When you made the intro, you said something interesting, and I want to start my whole story with that. You say, in AppSec we use tools, and I think the important part that you said there is we use tools, and this shows the fact that people should understand there is the human aspect to AppSec. Don't ever think that you can just buy a tool that will do everything for you. Humans are part of the process of development. They write the code. They need to understand the code. So as always, tools, whatever tools you choose, that's fine, but make sure you build a process for the people involved, for developers involved. And I just want to call it out because you did mention that, and I didn't want to lose that.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yeah, we do use tools. I mean, and while we try to automate some of it, and we definitely look to automate a lot of it with some of the DevSecOps stuff that we're doing, it's still human beings that are involved in the application development and application security process. So very rightly said. Now, with that, this is the first question I ask all my guests that come on the show. How did you get your start in security? So that's my first question. And usually some people have very wildly interesting stories or sometimes not so interesting, but I really want to know, how did you get your start in security and how did that journey start for you?
It's a good question. How did I get started with security? I never want to be in security. I don't know if that's something I should say or not, but I always wanted to be a games developer, or I thought I did for a long time. I started my university around 19 years old, and I was like, okay, I'm going to become a games developer. I will write games. I will write code. I think I still have some of my university demos online on YouTube where I looked at things and building things for my university courses. But after that, I got an interview with IBM for a position with them for what they call the technical sales engineer, kind of like a field architect. I don't know what other people are calling it. And there's a few things being discussed, and we discussed about mainframes, which funnily enough I found interesting at the time, and some other technologies, but one of them was security. And coming from Romania, it's a country that kind of has a reputation for doing bad things when it comes to cybersecurity. And I thought, you know what, security looks interesting. There are a few popular movies out at the time with hackers and everything, and I thought, you know what, I'd like to give this a go. I think I might like it. I think I'll enjoy it. So let's do this. And after that, my manager, who back then hired me, thought, what would be good for this guy? What would he like? So what he did is he just did a Google, like you do, you know. You just Google someone, you see if they have a LinkedIn or what they have, see if they have any experience or whatnot. And he came across my YouTube videos and some of the work I did there. And he was like, he knows how to code. This is our new application security guy. And that's how I came into it. And it turns out I really liked it. I enjoyed a lot understanding how security works, getting into the mindset of security, getting into the mindset of, hey, this can easily be abused to do something bad. But what I enjoyed most of it was the technicalities and the fact that application security is still development. A lot of people kind of see application security, hey, it's a branch of security. But the way I see it, it's still a lot of times development, it's education. It forces you to learn a lot of new things. Sometimes you can be doing a job for a while and you kind of get stuck, but the application security, you have to learn about new things. Since I started doing security, we all of a sudden started looking at software composition analysis, started looking at cloud security, and now we're talking about infrastructure as code and even more Internet of Things. And that's kind of how I came to be here. I've done the work as a technical sales engineer, whatever people call it, for a few years. And then I thought, hey, what's next for me? And it just happened that I was spending a lot of time with my product management team and talking a lot with them about things I'm seeing, things I would like to see in the product. And an opportunity came along, an opening came, and they said, hey, do you want to come in, maybe work with us? And I said, yeah, let's try it. And I've done a year of my time kind of being the technical guy on the team, helping setting up different requirements for different products. And then I got my own piece, which is the static application security testing, or SAST, as most people know it in the market.
All right. So now I think one of the things that it's always fascinated me, and also, sometimes I've wondered quite extensively is, where do you see this thing going, right? So we've suddenly seen a sea change in the way applications are. You're a developer, so you'll probably have seen this during your own tenure, developing stuff, writing stuff, and also being on the security side of the fence. So I think you've been on both sides of the fence at different times. Where do you see this going, especially because the last 3 years we've suddenly had this burst of the change in the way applications are delivered, right? So you have your microservices, you have the way things are going, it's much faster. Platforms are just mushrooming all over the place. Languages are coming up that we've not dealt with before. Where do you see this going? Where do you see this it's going to end up with?
It's a difficult question. I would say on your previous comment, I probably haven't spent as much time in development as other people did. So while I was writing a lot of code, and I still do in my time, and hopefully we can talk about that later if I remember to mention it. But I just spend a lot of time on this side of the fence, and I do like to spend a lot of time with my customers to understand where they are. I would split your question in two. You asked me, where do I think it's going? I'll tell you where do I hope it's going, and I hope it's going away. And it's weird, but sometimes we should think in the same way doctors do. What do they want to see? Where do they want medicine to go in someday? And I'm sure the answer will be, I want it to go away. I don't want us to have the problems in the first place. I'm hoping we can educate everyone properly from university. I'm hoping we can spend more time making security as part of the requirements. I am hoping a lot of that will happen. But where do I think realistically this will go? The analogy I like to use is similar to what happened to SIEM systems, the incident and event management systems, more or less. I see application security platforms or tools becoming more platforms than anything else, where different development teams will use different tools, they'll use their own choice, and then kind of events pop up, And you as a security team kind of do the assurance and tell them, hey, if any of this happens, we want to fix it because we understand the threat we're being exposed to. We understand what the problem is. We can easily set the guidelines for you, set the internal policies or whatever we call them. And then you just use the tool you want. Whether you want to use static analysis, whether you want to use dynamic analysis, or whether you want to use interactive analysis, some advanced machine learning, whatever you want to use. As soon as we see an issue, as soon as we see something happening, as a security team, we'll probably want to know about it, but we'll rely on you, the developers, and we'll trust you to do the right thing and the right job. Where I want this to be is I want us to be in a place where development teams will have someone that will know and will care about security enough to act as what we call a security champion. So kind of security becomes a real part of DevOps. And of course, whenever I say security champions, people think, oh, security training, 20 years of hacking, right? It just needs to be someone who knows how to write a safe SQL prepare statement. It doesn't have to be a lot more fancier than that, or someone who knows where to find security resources. So the final place where I think this will end up is development teams with a person that's kind of responsible for running security, making it automated wherever they want to be, and then security teams who can once in a while keep an eye on what you're doing and saying, yeah, you're doing the right stuff, you're doing the right thing. As far as the technologies and the innovations that are probably going to happen in this space, it's always difficult to guess. I think everyone has some intuition and everyone has some favorites they would like to see coming up. I think everyone is talking about fix suggestions and auto remediation and a lot of these things, which sound interesting and it's cool to hear about. But in the end, I think what security will become is hopefully another tick in the box. You're doing your regressions, you're doing your functional testing, you're doing your unit testing. Security just becomes one of those. If you do it as a developer, hopefully it should be more of a unit test. Kind of like what you've been doing with the tool you've been playing with, quick checks. While then you'll have some testing in the automation step or your build pipeline that will say, hey, someone's committing code or someone's building code that's slightly insecure. Do we want to do anything about it? And finally, at the other end, you'll have security. They'll be able to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm just going to do a deep dive of this. I'll do a pen test. I'll use the tools. I'll crank it up to a maximum, find everything I can, and tell you about it. But all of this gets fed into the same platform. So when you find something at a different stage, you'll be able to inform everyone else in the chain about what's happening and how you should respond to this in the future. I think a lot of times one of the biggest problems of these tools is not the tools themselves, but the cultural approach to keep them isolated from everyone else. Like, the tool does security and that's it. But in reality, you want the tool to be part of the process. And again, I'm kind of extending my answer here, but I'm hoping that this ends up in a place where the tools are part of the process and not the process. And I think it's one of the biggest advice I have for people out there doing any type of application security process. Make the tools a part of the process, not the process. Because if the tools are the process, then it will be hard for people to accept it and understand it. And it will be hard to learn security. They'll just rely on the tools to do everything. And you know what? A lot of the times you don't have to. You can do a lot of it well ahead of the tools.
One of the points that you brought up was pretty interesting about tools being part of the process and people using tools as the process, which a lot of them do. I know from experience, and I can quite agree with you that they do that a lot. However, the other side of the fence is also the fact that now coming to static analysis, right? Now, speaking about your subject, your focus area, especially within HCL AppScan, static analysis. Now, one of the common issues that we see with static analysis, I don't want to name any specific product or anything, but the entire industry, at least for the longest time, one of the big issues that we saw, or a lot of people had with static analysis, was false positives, right? And today, of course, it continues to be a problem in some quarters. It does not continue to be a problem for some. I'm not exactly sure the broad state of it, but definitely some places it's still an issue that a lot of some of my customers have faced over time. What are the things that you folks have been doing, or what do you think about, first of all, false positives and how they come about, and what is it that you've been doing to reduce false positives or address this issue in the broader scope of your product?
False positives is a conversation I really like to have. I like to say there is no such thing as a false positive. There's just another question you need to answer. One of the things that people confuse, or not confused, but it's unclear when dealing with application security testing, is there's different types. And my cat is assaulting me. He's trying to get in and it's moving my camera. What happens is when you deal with static analysis, you're dealing with an application, a bit of a void. It's a vacuum. It's just the application itself. I don't know where it's running. I don't know much about the context. Nowadays, I guess you might get some information about, hey, it's kind of running in a Docker environment, or it's running in a Node.js environment. But a lot of times you don't know who's interacting with it. You don't know how you're interacting with it. So a lot of the things we're doing is we're asking questions with static analysis. We're asking questions for the code, and we're saying, hey, code, tell me your secrets. Tell me, are you communicating over HTTP? Are you writing to a database? And then we come back with a list of these questions. And when we have this list of questions, some of them will be saying, well, you know what, we're quite confident with this, that this is a real problem, it goes a high severity. We're confident about it. But some of them will be posed to you as questions. So a lot of times people think about static analysis and saying, hey, it's giving me 3,000 issues. Well, in reality, what's giving you is maybe 100 issues and 2,900 or however many left questions. Is this a problem? Could this be a problem? Because static analysis, it's very theoretical in practice. And since data comes from a user, it goes to a database, it's a non-prepared statement. I know it's concatenated string, so it could be a SQL injection. But it could also be a feature because you just happen to be the UI to write to that database. So I just want to let you do whatever crazy things you can in your mind. The sky should be the limit. And that's kind of my first take on false positives. They are there, they are there in a way, but a lot of times I like to call them noise. It's things that are not interesting to you because in theory, something could happen. In practice, something might not happen, but it's good to ask those questions and be able to answer them. And I think part of the problem is people want to fix everything. They run the tools, and this is where it comes to the tool is the process. They put things through the tool and they say, I got too many findings. I cannot work with it. While the advice we have, and we've been giving for a while, is, hey, look, talk to your security team. Define what's a threat for you. Focus on some of the things you can easily fix. Make sure you're really good at those. Make sure you are the rock stars of SQL injection, cross-site scripting, OS injection, or whatever you think it's a threat to you. Talk to people outside, see what they're doing, and get that baseline really good, and then expand it slowly, because in that way you allow developers to learn at the same time as identifying things. And after a few iterations, we're going to have good confidence that, hey, they're only looking at these things, they know how to fix them. And then you slightly expand the goal and you start looking for more and more things. And that kind of helps you get through this process. And that's where the tools become part of the process and not the process, because you have people advising with each other. You'll have that security conscious person in your team that can go and say, I'm looking at this and I think it's real. I think I can fix it. And finally, you'll be able to escalate that to security, and security will be able to help you more. But I see a lot of the times it's developers get the tool, security teams, and then you get a lot of developers asking security, hey, what's happening with this? They cannot keep up with the numbers. And then, hey, they're saying too many findings, too many false positives. It becomes a problem. I cannot deal with this. And it's a fair statement in their view. I'd be upset if I would have to answer 3,000 emails all of a sudden. But what happens with me in emails is I get a few emails every day that I will respond. I'll answer them straight up because I know they're important. And a lot of emails that go to low priority emails, let's call them, which I'll answer in the end. But, maybe at the end of the week, once I'm done with really high priority ones. And that helps me keep a steady flow going. And when I talk about static analysis and false positives, I like to make this analogy saying, if you start static analysis when your project is done, or after 10 years of development, of course, you're going to find a lot of stuff. If you do not focus on something specific that I know to be a threat, then you are going to struggle to handle that. It's just trying to answer 10,000 emails after your holiday. No one can do it. So you just look at the ones with high importance, you answer those, and everything else gets sent to the low priority folder, people call it, and deal with that. Now that's part of the story. That's how I feel about false positives. They're bad, but they're good as well. They should make you ask the question and should make you think a bit more about security. In terms of what we've been doing with false positives, we have been looking at different ways of handling them, and we have been prioritizing things and prioritizing up, prioritizing down. And to do this, we've been using some of our engineers. They have years of doing this, years of training doing it, and they kind of build a little machine learning algorithm that goes through them and says, this one gets prioritized high. The other one is not so interesting. It's very unlikely something will happen with this, so we're going to prioritize it low. And at the end of it, we just give you that set of results that would say, hey, here's what's really interesting and important for you. We group them together to make sure they're easy to fix. A lot of times the same multiple issues can be fixed with 1 or 2 lines of code. And we present that back to allow developers to expedite their work.
So there were 2 things that, stood out in that statement you made about false positives. One is about questions. And I like to think of static analysis as questions myself also, because especially with the kind of the newer tools that are coming out in this space, especially if you look at CodeQL or 7grep, they're essentially questions. They allow you to query. They query stuff, and they essentially, that in a very literal sense, they're questions. The other point that you mentioned was noise, signal versus noise, which is again to put it naively, true positive versus false positive, right? Signal versus noise. Naively speaking. Now, one of the things, what would you suggest to somebody, regardless of tool? Forget, AppScan, forget this, forget whatever, any tool that they have. I'm not going to focus on a tool, but how do you work with? Obviously, you work with customers. How do you suggest that they, first of all, reduce noise, and second, deal with noise? What would you suggest? What is your take on that situation, especially when there is noise?
I would say, first off, define a policy. Establish what needs to be fixed ASAP and what you care about. A lot of the times it will be a case of you have a security team, and we have some customers where those teams are great. I've worked with people where the security teams are really, on point. They know what they want. They know what they're after. Nothing stops them. It's stuff that you'd expect. Sometimes the stuff you don't expect that they're after, but they know what they want. So always, always, always talk to your security teams and understand what you want to fix. The second part of it is don't take it personal when security says it's not noise, but do be ready to educate yourself to explain why it's not noise and why it is noise. So when security comes back and says you have to fix all of this, you will want to be a bit educated to say why it's not noise. And I think that's where education comes into play, and you want to spend time with it. You want to learn a bit more about security, and having a security champion and having a true DevSecOps approach will benefit you a lot. It's one other easy way to deal with noise. And the third one is look at your last pen test and see which were the areas of concern the pen tester has raised with you. A lot of the pen tests I've seen and a lot of pen testers I've been talking to, they can do that. They can do a bit of thread modeling for you as well. They'll be able to tell you, hey, look, you're dealing with databases. You have a lot of databases queries throughout your application. That should be your number one concern. Number two, you're storing files to a disk. You're talking to the disk. You should be focusing on that. Work with someone from the outside if you're not sure. Go outside and ask for a bit of help. Sometimes this will be quite easy to do if you have friends. I think it's easier for us in security because we kind of know a lot of security people and we can help each other out. But just go outside. There's a lot of conferences. There's a lot of people talking about this. Learn a bit of thread modeling. Once you know how to do a bit of thread modeling, you'll be able to define your own policy for your application. And all of a sudden, you'll be able to start saying, I don't deal with, I don't know what example to pull out here from the top of my head, but I don't write to the disk. So everything I see some that says, hey, you're dealing with OS injection, I'm probably going to think, well, it's probably that API that routes something to the disk, but it's actually, it's disk to disk. I've done that in my thread modeling. No one touches the disk other than me. So if they have access to the machine, the application would be of interest to them. So I will just say, not part of my policy. But defining your own policies and doing a bit of thread modeling can help you a lot with this. And education is a big part of it. Whenever you feel stuck, I think there's a lot of education tools out there. There's a lot of webinars about it nowadays. There's a lot of YouTube content. I've been watching you on YouTube. I think that's how we got in touch. I started doing something really cool on YouTube, and I was like, hey, let me reach out and see what he can tell about this thing I'm building. Is it a great idea? Is it a bad idea? So look out for education information. Learn to do a bit of threat modeling. Ask for help from external places. Pen testers are a great resource. Always, try and talk to them when the pen test results come back and say, hey, which are the areas I should focus on? And they can help you with that. And then knowing what you want to look for can help you with the noise. You can't make the tools less noisy because different people want different things. So you need to have quite a big range of things you look for, because that's why you're asking questions. That's how you can find some time bombs, some backdoors. But in reality, if you know what you really want to do, what you're really focused on, you can just narrow the list and say, I want to filter by these top 3 CVEs, and that's it. Those will give me everything I want, and CWEs, and that will give me everything I want, and it will allow me to stay focused to my job.
So one point that you mentioned, of course, is a pet project of mine, which is threat modeling, right? So threat modeling is something that I'm big on. In fact, my take on threat modeling is that threat modeling essentially is a playbook for your entire application security program, right? So if you do a good job of threat modeling, you can do a good job of static analysis, because you can ask your static analysis tools to look for specific patterns. You can have your pen testers look for specific patterns. You can have your developers fix specific kind of bugs and, not introduce specific kind of bugs. The way I see threat modeling is that the benefits of good threat modeling kind of work across the SDLC.
Absolutely.
Rather than just in the planning or design stage of the product. So that's a very important point as well.
And as we said,
Go ahead.
Different parts of the process should be interconnected, right? And sometimes you can get the threat modeling at the end of a pen test if you just ask nicely, or depending on how big your project is. Some projects will require some serious effort to threat model, but for whatever small fee, or for a beer or something, they'll be able to tell you focus on this. And you're right, threat modeling can help you a lot. It doesn't have to be super complex. The way I like to present threat modeling is it's fairly basic. That's the data came from the user.
Yeah.
And when I say user, it does have to be a human. It can be a machine, whatever. Don't trust it. And
Yeah.
Then if you do anything with that data, you need to make sure you have a role to look at it and understand it. And that's the most basic way of doing it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. One of the things that constantly fascinate me, especially in the last, I would say 5 years or so, you've suddenly seen this burst of new languages, new platforms, new frameworks. You have Rust, you have Go, you have Dart, you have Elixir. How do you guys
Julian. I keep losing track of everything they create.
OCaml and all this stuff. How do you guys manage? How do you folks actually, first of all, build rules for this many things? And how do you manage patterns, your anti-patterns, your invariants? I'm sure that's not trivial. How do you guys actually manage it? What is your take on that?
It's a big task, and it's difficult, and it's becoming more difficult. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube how to build your own scripting language, and you end up with a new scripting language that becomes very popular. My favorite one I've seen recently is called PogJS. It's another JavaScript framework. I think it's one of the nightmares of everyone doing application security in SAST. It gets me into a blinking. It's maddening. But I think one of the things we noticed, before I get into how we kind of handling, one of the things we noticed with a lot of these new languages, the people building them, or a lot of the times, they're more security conscious than they used to. I remember reading a bit about SQL injection when I started with this, and how it came way back when, and Microsoft said it's a feature, not a bug, and that's how it kind of ended up with SQL injection. But a lot of these times these days, the frameworks that are being built, the languages, they try to be secure by default. And they allow you to do things, but they run the security code on their own. They don't expect you to do sanitizations for cross-site scripting. You can just print a user input, and all of a sudden it works. They don't expect you to go ahead and sanitize it. They do this secure by default work. They do a great job of it. And a lot more frameworks for us nowadays is just a case of, hey, let's look how you turn that off and fix it and create a rule for it, which is quite nice. It's quite beneficial for us as security companies to be able to look at what they're saying. Hey, here's some security considerations. There's a lot of research being done. How do we handle this and how do we find stuff? There's a lot of research being done. Like everyone else, we have our own internal research teams that kind of look out for stuff and look at how we can mess with some things, how we can make it do bad things in the right way. But there are also a lot of research of people saying, hey, there's a problem with this, there's a problem with that. There's a lot of information coming from the developers or the vendors themselves. When they build a framework, they say, hey, here's how you do this securely, because it is a consideration. They do want to make it into the enterprise space, and the enterprise space does require some level of security maturity. So they have to start thinking about how do I do things in a secure way by default. And they create those best practices. And in terms of how you create the patterns, is just, unfortunately, it's a lot of man hours. It is what it is. Different languages have different structures. They need to be created in a different way. We try to optimize as much as everyone else, but a lot of times the way you have to deal with it is put the effort in, take some time off, look at what's popular, and decide which one you want to focus on. It's not a case of just expanding sideways. We constantly have to expand upwards, kind of like supporting later and later versions of a language. And that it just comes with effort. On our side, I'm lucky to have a great team that can do a lot of the work. They're getting better at it. You'll be surprised that the more people do this security analysis, the better they get at it, just like they would with threat modeling. And they're able to say, hey, this language is not really doing a lot with anything else other than manipulating databases. So I'm just going to start looking around for research being done by people. I'm going to look for, talks on the topic. I'm going to look on papers on the topic of this language and write into database, see if there's anything there. And that's how you handle it. That's how you build a lot of the knowledge, a lot of the information you need in your static analysis tools to get where you want. And a lot of times that we're seeing lately, I think people, they want a lot more focused things in terms of remediation. So a part of the time we spend is not necessarily figuring out what we need to look for, because the community a lot of times exposes those and vendors do. But what we spend a lot of time is writing the correct article, remediation information, the advisor information to help a developer understand it. Because whether people want to accept it or not, this stuff needs to be simple and needs to be usable by a developer. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong, and we have to go back and redo it. But that's where we spend a lot of our time, is writing the articles that make it easy for them to work with. The rules themselves, you write a few and then you get used to it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think especially with the state of the languages, and suddenly, I mean, especially, just over the last 2 years, I myself have seen this sudden expanding landscape in terms of languages. The other thing that also comes to my mind quite a bit with this is that today, I think static analysis used to be, at least, when I say used to be, in some cases, for some tools, it still is, but it used to be extensively language focused, right? You're looking at JavaScript language vulnerability, Java language vulnerabilities. But what today people, I think, want are framework level vulnerabilities. Hey, how do I find vulnerabilities in Vue.js or Angular or, on Django or Flask or Node? Yeah, I mean, Node at least a little bit more platformy than frameworky, but what I'm trying to say is that they want, so for instance, let's say I'm writing cloud code with Python and Amazon. I want to find library issues with Boto3. How am I using Amazon's Boto3 and introducing vulnerabilities in my Amazon stack that I've written in Python? That's what I think people are looking for. And that's why you see a lot of these, these query tools have tried to come into that space as well. How do you address those? I mean, and what kind of strategies do you adopt for such things, especially because I think is that a need, first of all, or do you see that as a need, and how do you address
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. You do have that as a need. and every framework will do things in a slightly different way. As I said in my previous answer, luckily, a lot of these frameworks coming up, they kind of come secure by default. So doing bad things, you really have to go out of your way and mess with some things to do so. But there are still a lot of cases where you can do that. Frameworks for us come in not much different than any other language because they tend to be so different in the way you use them. And it's a lot of times it's a set of brand new APIs. We kind of have to do the same work and we have to do the same research. From our side, we kind of bundle all the frameworks under the same language. We can't really say up front which one you're using. It's not always visible. Sometimes might not have the libraries attached, or isn't fingerprinting them is probably not the easiest thing to do. So we run the rules. If we get a hit, we'll know, hey, it's this framework, and we'll present it back to you. But it is very important. I think it's very important to create the rules specific for those frameworks. Sometimes you'll find that a generic rule can find something in a framework, but where you would struggle is what I mentioned in the previous answer, the remediation advice and the information about what the problem is. Because this is a framework specific, it'll have a different way to be fixed than a generic problem. I'm bad at thinking of SQL frameworks that would have vulnerability in Java, but an execute query would probably have a different fix than a Florin.broken Java SQL integration library that execute query. And when you have a framework, we want to investigate the framework. We want to understand what's the correct way of doing it in that framework. Because if you do it in the framework's way, it's probably the safer way to do it than writing your own code and building your own thing. One of the interesting talks I always have with people in our research lab, and specifically the DAS team that I talked once in a while, is they keep seeing people trying to implement their own cross-site scripting protections, their own cross-site scripting protection libraries and code. And the amount of times it works, it's hilariously low. They get it wrong so many times. Even with the OWASP cross-site scripting cheat sheet and all of that, it's difficult. So what we try to say is like, hey, you're using this framework, here's how you do it. Just don't use this dangerous flag in your construct. Don't say execute script equals true for every single thing you print on screen just because you needed to execute some script somewhere in your code. So just disable that and you'll be safe. It's the framework's own way of doing things safely. But yeah, it's important to look at the frameworks, and we try to do it ourselves. I think JavaScript is the #1 offender in here. I expect someday I'll have to put up with a JavaScript framework just to cook my dinner because my new stove will use JavaScript. It's coming in so many different flavors. Developers like it. And yeah, frameworks are important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. JavaScript. Yeah, I think there's probably like one JavaScript framework released every day or something like that. I think it's so ubiquitous. It's all over the place, right? So yeah. Just a quick trivia question. Which is your worst, or which do you feel, according to, based on your static analysis experience, which is the toughest vulnerability to identify, or class of vulnerabilities to identify?
That's a tricky one because it depends on the application you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
I would say something really difficult to identify for static analysis in general, it's backdoors. Mm-hmm. And it's probably for every security tool. It's not necessarily a vulnerability. I wouldn't call it, it's not a type, right? So I don't know if it's fair to answer the question that way because the way I like to put it is backdoors, it's perfectly written code. It's perfectly secure code that does really bad things. They will not let credentials unvalidated to go through. So backdoors are nearly impossible to find. But if I were to choose one of my favorites that it's somewhat tricky to find by some tools, and SAST is really good at, I would say probably like a blind SQL injection. For DAS, it's quite difficult to get a blind SQL. For pen testers, it's all about the timing and trying it and retrying it and do this progressive staged query. While static analysis can just look at it and be like, hey, it's SQL writing to SQL. You're not sanitizing data. That's a blind SQL injection. Or I think some people call it a second order SQL injection, depending on where you're looking at, which place you're looking at it from. But I think that's an interesting one for static analysis. Is it the most difficult one? I don't know. I have my engineers to tell me which one is that. I'll have to go back to them and ask which one do you hate the most. But it has to be something in JavaScript. Definitely something
It's
in
probably
JavaScript.
cross-site scripting is what I'd imagine, because I can't imagine actually having a very I can't imagine being too confident writing a cross-site scripting identifying static analysis rule myself. I mean, unless it's
Agreed.
like dangerously set in our HTML or something. I mean, something obvious like that.
Yeah,
But
I think it depends on
yeah,
the framework. And some
yeah,
frameworks will have a good time of saying you just disable the cross-site scripting protection. It says right there on the tin, cross-site scripting protection, and you set it to false.
yeah,
But in some of them, just like you said, it'll be difficult to find it out because you're getting the data from somewhere, you're passing it through a different application layer, and then you bring it back out, bring it
yeah.
back to the user. So it's difficult. But a
It's
lot of them
probably
will,
worse with DOM based, I think. With DOM based, it's probably even worse.
yeah. I would struggle to tell which one is the worst, but there is a chance cross-site scripting is out there. I mean, on the
Yeah,
other hand, cross-site scripting is amazing for dynamic analysis. Dynamic analysis can just rip your application
yeah,
to shreds with a
yeah,
million different encodings for
yeah,
a payload and find stuff. While static analysis will be like, I don't know if this renders or not. I think it does.
yeah.
It prints stuff out to the user. I was like, maybe.
I
But
think there are too many interaction touch points, I think, with cross-site scripting, which is why I would imagine that that would probably be the worst. Because I can't imagine being very confident writing a cross-site scripting rule. But
yeah,
anyway,
a lot of
yeah,
frameworks are doing a lot better. I'll just say this, a shout out to whoever has been building protections into their frameworks for cross-site scripting, and some of the really big vendors have been doing this. The browsers themselves, they're a lot
yes,
better at saying like, hey, hang on a second, you're trying to execute another JavaScript. They're like, hang on a
yeah,
second, give me a
yeah,
second. So I think people are getting better at that. The one I would like to absolutely see gone, if it was after my preferences, would be, just kill out the SQL injections. Bobby tables has been around for a long time. Little Bobby
1998.
tables. If you don't know who Little Bobby tables is, you might want to look it up, but you will want to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that I always wonder, especially, and I thought of asking this question, especially once we scheduled this, was obviously you've seen the language market evolve. You've seen, static analysis tool evolve in general, how they evolve in different types of tools. How have you seen the customer landscape evolving? How have you seen your customers changing, in big and small ways? What are those things that you've noticed in your, when you talk to them? Obviously, you have some touch point with them and you talk to them about different types of things. How have you seen them evolve and how have they grappled with this problem?
I think the immediate thing we've seen after the agile and DevOps approach came to market and all that was, I hope I'm using this term right, is they started democratizing development, and they said whatever framework you want to use it. Just let us know about it. We'll look at it beforehand, we'll do some analysis, and then say if you're good to go or not. And what we've seen a lot is they went from, hey, we're a Java shop, we're a .NET shop, we're a PHP shop, to, no, we do a bit of everything. We need the tool to do a bit of everything. And we're like, okay, so what does everything mean? And then you go through the list and it's like, hey, we have Java, we have .NET, we have PHP, we have JavaScript with Node and Angular and Vue and React. We have COBOL, we still have a mainframe. We do some COBOL. We have Python because we do some artificial intelligence projects. So I've seen a lot of languages coming into the environment, a lot more than we used to do before, a lot more than we thought will happen. In reality, we thought company would still want to standardize on development platform, but now we're seeing like, no, they have their own choice. They can pick whatever they want and they'll use whatever they want, and you kind of have to help us secure it. And it's fair enough, for us, we're happy to do it. We had some technologies in place that could get them started with straight away, and then later on bring static analysis to cover all of those languages. What we did see is it's kind of more important for them to have a set of tools to leverage. And when I said a set of tools, I'm not necessarily referring to different vendors, but some of them will do static analysis. Well, you just brought a new language for some web, no one supports it, what are you going to do? So that's why I recommend, have a set of tools at your disposition, static analysis, dynamic analysis. I share some of that knowledge with their developers, let them know, and give them a tool that works for them, and find the model that makes it work. Another thing we found is they started focusing a lot on specific high-level threats, specific, but they really want to get, hey, just I understand I cannot be fully secure. And they kind of went to this approach from Waterfall, because Waterfall kind of gave you a nice, comfortable piece at the end where you could spend time and say, you know what, I will go ahead and I will do my security testing at this point. I'll have a pen test, I'll fix stuff, and then I'll release. But because they're now moving to, hey, production, feature production, accelerating the cycles and accelerating the release, we are seeing them a lot more interested in the, hey, let me catch the really important things, the really dangerous ones. I want to catch them. I want to make sure I don't make any mistakes there. And I'll have some appetite for a security risk. It doesn't always happen for that appetite to be big. I think most people have quite a low appetite for risk, but they do understand, hey, I cannot be 100% secure, but I want to make sure that the things that would really hurt me and my customers are being taken care of. I'm handling those in my development, and they never make it to production. So we went from this place where you had security teams kind of being responsible for security because they're running it all the way at the end and doing this manual code reviews, to more, hey, developers kind of going to do this throughout, and we're going to focus on finding the really high priority ones and fix those as we do so they don't make it to production. But the one thing I didn't like seeing, and I kind of like seeing this, to be honest, because it includes developers to this process, and hopefully they're not going to release those really, really dangerous things into the wild while allowing their business to stay competitive. They have to. I'm sure some people will take shortcuts, they'll become very famous, and then your data gets exposed, my data gets exposed, and we're no better for it. And this was good to see security moving to developers, but one of the trends I didn't like seeing is when companies move into DevOps, but they put a weird model in place where security is kind of like a little bolt-on. Someone does some security, but they don't own the code, and they're not really part of the development team. They're not security either. And it's like a tool you're putting the code through, and developers get very frustrated when they get to ask to fix everything, because they get this long lists of vulnerabilities they're asked to fix, and they're like, first off, I don't know what this is. Second off, they're all false. Prove me wrong. Otherwise, they're all false. And it goes back to what I was saying, I didn't like that people made the tools the process. I like it when people made the tools feed their new process, which is developers should be scanning. I like it when they make the tools part of the process and define what the process they do, but some places I've seen, they kind of made the tools the process and developers were not happy. I'm happy to report that most of those that I've seen are changing, but it took a while to listen to developers and understand how that needs to be done. But I'd say the biggest change, languages, different languages, bunch of different frameworks, them building languages and frameworks themselves. I've seen a few of those cases. So switching from, hey, you need to be really good at Java to support me, to, hey, you need to do all of these languages to support me, which has been a shift that I think a lot of the SaaS vendors have to go through.
What impact do you think, at least from your company's perspective, has the cloud had on you folks? As in, some complexity, of course, may have been brought in, but has it given you some opportunity? What has changed for you, both from a weakness and opportunity perspective?
For us, a big opportunity of the cloud is we could offer things as a service all of a sudden. And when you offer things as a service, it's a much easier way to improve on things. It's a much easier way to kind of fail fast. It's a concept that everyone follows, It doesn't mean necessarily you fail, but you push something out and you get feedback on it and you can improve it as you go along. And that was kind of the nature of the cloud for us. It allows us to do that while, with the on-premise, you have to be a bit more thorough when you push out some things. So that was a great opportunity for us. Some of the challenges that came was all of a sudden we're starting to look at infrastructure as code, which, it's fair to say we kind of saw coming, but it probably came to market a lot faster than we expected it, and became popular a lot faster than we expected it, because some of the really popular companies benefited the cloud native things. They benefited from this way of doing things in the cloud. Like, I'm just going to run a few lines of code and it's going to automatically deploy stuff for me. It's going to deploy a server. It's going to deploy a new machine for my project. And it's something that we need to learn to handle. It's one of our main projects right now, understanding how we can do this with static analysis. Because surprisingly, if it's code, if it's a configuration file, we can scan it, we can find stuff in it. So why not do it? It's an opportunity for us to help developers even more. And
Besides, you only have to go with YAML, right? You just have to scan YAML.
Sorry, what was that?
Cases, you just have to scan YAML in most cases.
Oh yeah, you scan the YAML, you scan the. I guess Kubernetes is YAML and Docker files are YAML. So
Ansible is
Docker
YAML too.
configs. I'm still learning on the YAML's different Docker configurations and how you can do it. But yes, it does bring some challenges, right? As I said in the beginning, with application security, you find out you have to learn about something else. You have to learn something new. And it's good. It does sometimes make us take a step back and reconsider, okay, what are we doing? Do we want to boil the ocean looking for this one vulnerability, or do we want to kind of do like a high-level surface thing and find as many things as you can? And it's a lot of questions that makes us ask again, you take another step back. But it brought some opportunities for us. Our machine learning would have been really, really hard to do without the cloud. Because in the cloud, we can look at how it worked, we can talk to customers, we can adjust it ourselves. One of the things we have to do with machine learning is we have to supervise it. We don't want our algorithm to think that cross-site scripting is not dangerous because everyone is marking those findings as noise. It's the last thing you want to do with it. So we had to supervise it, but the cloud allowed us to do that supervised training, see how it behaved, look at the impact, and then make it available for people. On the other hand, the cloud meant that there's a lot more applications being built a lot faster, a lot more technologies becoming popular in the infrastructure as code, and we now have to look at it and do our analysis and research it and start writing rules to find those things as well. Luckily, YAML is very easy to parse, unlike JavaScript. And again, it does a lot of really good things by default. I was looking at the OWASP article, kind of like the top issues you can do. And if you look through it, there's most of the times people just want to do something more, and then they enable write to disk or something. And it's things as basic as that. It's like, look, by default, I'm running with read only. Don't make me write to disk. I don't have to. And I'm showing my playing cards here, which becomes a bit of a habit on calls nowadays. But it allows us to do that. The cloud allows us to look at new things and learn new things for ourselves. And ourselves can benefit from it as well. We can make our scanning faster. We can make our machines scale up more, giving us faster results back. It allows us to look into machine learning, more powerful systems for machine learning, and all the different swarming things and all of that. There's some cool research going on with all of that and what can be done. So the benefits, what everyone else gets, benefits of the cloud. Challenges is having to deal with this new world, infrastructure as code.
Right. So last question, Florin, before we go. If you were to highlight three things, especially given this current circumstances, that companies are doing wrong, that if they did right, they would get, let us say, massive benefit from static analysis. What are those three things?
One of it we've probably mentioned a few times, but learn to do some thread modeling, where teach your developers to do some basic thread modeling. If they understand the basic concepts of a few issues, they will be in a really good position to look at something and say, all of this, I don't think it's a priority for us, so we're going to push it to the side. It's going to help us deal with the noise. So a bit of thread modeling education for developers, or get some people to help them with thread modeling. I think number one will give you some good value out of it. Convert those into policies, and that's pretty much your application security playbook, as we said. The second item I had in my mind, and it kind of eluded me, was, and now I'm drawing a blank because I had so nicely lined up to move into it from thread modeling. Security champions. Start making security part of the development and start talking to them and start asking a few questions. Just start with, what about security? Just ask one of those questions, see if anyone has an answer to it. If your development team has an answer to what about security, it means that's good. They could ask you which security, which is great. It means, okay, they've considered some things. They can ask you what security, and that's a bit concerning because there's no security, but that, right? There's nothing in place. But start looking at getting some security champions as part of your development teams. There are some really good DevSecOps groups out there. There will be talking about how you can make security part of it, don't make security a bolt-on to your practices. It's difficult. It's difficult for developers more than anyone else. You think the security person that will have to run all the scanning is the one that struggles most. But reality is a lot of times we're pretty good with scripts. We know how to automate things. We'll be able to put your code through the tools, get the results out, and that's fine. But what happens then if you don't have that threat modeling, you won't know what to look for, so you look for everything, which will get developers angry. But if you cannot do the threat modeling and you still have to send a full set of results back to developers, at least have that security champion to do it with the team. They'll be able to go through that and say, look, we think these are the threats we want to target in your application. Realistically, it's what we can humanly do as part of our development cycle. So do that as well. And if I were to pick a third one, just be prepared to reconsider what you're doing. Honestly, I've seen a lot of people being in a mindset of, we want to do this. We need to do this. It needs to be done this way before doing any analysis. I'm a strong-headed person. I'm sure there's other people like me out there, and it's like, that's how we do it. It's the best idea. Just be able to reconsider things. We've seen projects where they want to do things in a specific way. Turns out that never got off the ground, and we had to go back and reconsider, go back to the drawing board. It took a while to convince them to follow the model, but after they followed the model, we became really close friends because we found out that something they can do. They found out that they can make the tool a part of the process and not make the tool the process. And going back to that thing we mentioned earlier on. And then they made it work for them. And in the end, it turned out that they were happy. They can use the tool. They can get the things they want out of static application security testing. And their developers were happier that, hey, it's a workload we can manage. We understand why we have to do it, which was the most important thing, understanding. And they found out that, hey, we can now build some security champions and some security groups. And developers, you'd be surprised how quickly they can become self-sufficient with these things. They learn to deploy agents through code. They learned to do a lot of crazy things over the last few years, and security is not that much of a challenge if you just give them the time and the right pace at which they can learn things. And those would be the top three.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the quote from this interview would be, make the tool part of the process and not the process. So I think that was the biggest take home, I think, for a lot of folks. Don't think of the tool as the be all and end all of things. And I think that's very important because a lot of times in DevSecOps, people think in terms of tools and automation all the time, and I don't really think of people working together. And I think that's very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember talking to someone about, we always want to do more with the tools, right? Self-driving cars, awesome. All of this. The thing is, even with a self-driving car, as great as it sounds, you still want to know why it's doing certain things. I want to know why my car all of a sudden is going right in the middle of the road. And the basic concept is, yes, it goes right because you switch lane because you want to take a right later on. But if you don't understand, all of a sudden you're like, why is it doing this? Same thing with security. Don't just expect the tools to do things for you. Explain why you want to do some of these things. And myself, I sell tools. It is the honest truth. I'm working for a company that focuses on this. But we do want our customers to be successful because at the end of the day, my credit card details are with them. My personal details, my entire life is stored in a digital format with them. So when they fail something, I feel it. It has repercussions on me. I'm the one getting a TV bought somewhere in a random part of the world, or my credit card is the one that's used to purchase cinema tickets for a group of people somewhere in the world. And it's important to start thinking that, hey, security is something for all of us. We don't realize it, but we do security every single day through our lives. Our security of our own person, just don't put your hand in boiling water. And code is going to be a bigger part of our daily lives. With IoT coming, with a lot more gadgets around us, it's important that we start thinking like, okay, what can I do to prevent this from posing a threat, a psychological threat or whatnot, or whatever threat there is. I think the most interesting story with cybersecurity posing a physical threat came from, I'm not sure if you remember the Ashley Madison hack.
Yeah.
It was the dating, whatever agency it was. And I think there was like one or two people that committed suicide because of it,
Yeah.
which was quite a sad thing to see that, hey, all of a sudden
Yeah.
this intangible thing, which is the software, which is the code, can cause repercussions in the real world. And we
Yeah.
need to make sure that we don't do that. We are as good as we can with security, but let's educate ourselves. Let's take it slow. We were never taught security in school. I don't think anyone did. We learned on ourselves, on our own, and it's a process. Let's make sure we make it as enjoyable as possible.
Right, absolutely. Thanks so much, Florin. Thanks for being here with us, and thanks for sharing your thoughts. I think it was very interesting to hear different perspectives. I hope you had fun too. Thanks so much for
Absolutely.
being.
As I said, I like talking, and I like chatting with people. I'm looking forward to be here back in the next session in a year's time to see how everyone else is doing. Hopefully everyone's traveling, or maybe we get to meet at one of these conferences. I think we're supposed to cross paths a few times if we were going to all the main conferences. But yeah, like I've heard someone saying recently, until next time, everyone stay positive and test negative.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one to leave with. Thanks so much, Florin. So that was Florin from HCL AppScan. I really liked chatting with them. It was a lot of fun. And until the next episode of AppSec Engineer, thanks everyone. Thanks for watching. Bye.